So hello and welcome to a special edition of the Benefex Digital Water Cooler to celebrate Pride Month. Today we will be talking about Pride with Purpose, and I'm joined by two very special guests. Karen Hamar, Reward and Operations Director, and Jessica Peacock, Inclusion and Wellbeing Lead at Ørsted, the world's leader in offshore wind. Good morning both. How are you doing today? Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Karen, for those who haven't heard of Ørsted, could you please just tell us a little bit about the company?
So we are a Danish-owned company and we're the world leading in renewable energy. And we basically say, you know, we want a world that runs on green energy. So we have a big presence in the UK, and our main business is operating and building offshore wind farms. So yes, we do operate the biggest wind farm in the world. And before we operated the biggest wind farm in the world, we operated the biggest wind farm in the world. We just built a bigger one. Yeah. And now we're building an even bigger one. So yeah, it's absolutely amazing, the technology and how far it's gone, and really it's great to work for a company that, you know, has such a great purpose that will really help the world.
Excellent, good stuff. And so as we can see this month, businesses everywhere are changing their logos to celebrate and represent Pride Month. But for many LGBTQ plus employees, they still face discrimination around the world. And so a logo change only goes so far. And so today we're going to be discussing what a truly inclusive organization looks like, how businesses can navigate the bureaucracy of legal restrictions in certain countries and cultural expectations in others. And we'll be looking at how organizations can embody equality and cultivate an authentically inclusive workplace for all, not just this month, but for all year round. And as always, we would like this to be as interactive as possible. So please send us your questions, thoughts or comments using the Q&A or chat functionality on Zoom. Feel free to ask myself, Jessica or Karen, any questions you might have. Feel free to disagree with us or share any experiences that you have within your own organization. And so to get us started, I've got probably a pretty obvious question, but one that I don't think gets asked enough. And that is, why is it important for organizations to be involved in celebrating Pride? And why specifically is it important to Ørsted? And I'll come to you first, Jessica.
So I think from our perspective as an organization, Pride is something that's really important for us to celebrate for a number of reasons. The first is that it's vital that we show the world where our values lie. We are an organization growing globally, and it's absolutely vital to us, to our customers, to the people, our prospective employees, that they know what we stand for. And Pride is a really great way for us to do that. Importantly, and I would say probably most importantly, it's a way for us to recognize and celebrate the LGBT plus people in our organization, which is a really huge thing for us to be able to do, especially considering some of the environments we work in. So we need that celebration. What's also really important, and I think more broadly outside of Ørsted, is that we remember the history. We remember why we celebrate Pride. We educate people around why we celebrate Pride. In a lot of countries, we take for granted and we assume that LGBT plus people are included, are fine, especially like lesbian, gay and bisexual people. So that section, we imagine that everything's fine and everyone's successful, because we do have some really successful and fantastic, especially gay role models in the business world. But actually, when we start looking into it, when we start to think about that, we see that there's a reason why you will see signs that say things like Pride started as a riot. Because it is a recent thing to have those rights, those basic rights, and lots of countries, 72 in fact, it's still illegal to be gay. So it's vital for us to still be standing up and kind of making that statement. We are not done, and it's so important that we have that conversation.
And I guess it's about finding the best people, right? So if you exclude groups of people, any group of people, then you are excluding an opportunity to get the best people who can innovate and create and deliver the best customer service.
Absolutely. I think what's really important for us that we think about regularly is how do we kind of attract and retain the best talent, and the best talent doesn't look, sound and come from the same background. So we need to ensure that if the best person for the job is LGBT, that they feel safe and comfortable to deliver their role to the best of their ability in our business. Otherwise, we're bringing someone in with all of their amazing passion and we're stopping them from being able to thrive, which kind of defeats the purpose of having these initiatives in the first place. So.
And Karen, inclusivity and sustainability feel like they're closely related. They're very progressive ideas, I guess. And I think when you look at organizations that value both of those, they feel like they fit together quite nicely. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. It's really important to us. Obviously we want, we're a very sustainable business. We've done a huge amount of work in the last, since I've been with the business in 5 years, in the fact that when we recruited somebody, we actually looked at the language we were using. Is it inclusive language? Is it retaining, attracting the right sort of person that will come on that journey with us? And it doesn't really matter who that person is, as long as they've got that passion for sustainability and obviously the skills to be able to do their job. But when we looked at a lot of, our advertising for people and recruitment, and also within internally on our policies, we actually said, are we being inclusive? Are we involving everybody in this? So we did a huge amount of work to look at our language, our tone of voice, and make sure and not just sort of the LGBT plus community, but also gender, ethnicity within that as well. So although we're talking about pride, there's lots of other groups there that we need to be inclusive. And, maybe go off the topic slightly, but we also look at our meeting structures, because somebody could be, and it doesn't matter who they are, they could be very quiet. We've got to make sure that they're included in meetings, especially when we've been in lockdown. And not everybody is comfortable in speaking up in a virtual environment, and you can't see them in the room. So it is absolutely essential, because everybody should have that voice and able to say it and follow their passion. And so many people are passionate about the environment and sustainability.
And I think for us as well, one of the really great things that we get to harness around inclusion, we hope we'll be able to harness, is reflecting on our journey with sustainability. So Ørsted began as an oil and gas company and turned that business completely around over a period of years, and we've got really specific aims to run completely on sustainable energy and green energy, and we're reaching those. We've exceeded those goals, and one of the really important things that we were able to do that, and when I'm interviewing people or I'm speaking about Ørsted, the one thing that I can say with huge confidence is, it really doesn't matter who you speak to in our company. If you ask them about green energy, if you ask them about sustainability, every single person sees that as part of our purpose. Now, it's our job, my job, to create something really similar for inclusion, to take that innovation, that creativity, that thing that makes us unique. And all of our businesses have that thing that makes us unique, that gives us our drive. And we want to take that ability and reflect that back around inclusion. It's so important for us to be able to take kind of this energy that we've got, this innovation and this creativity, and push it straight into creating a more inclusive culture. And it speaks really well to the aspects of sustainability, like social sustainability, and the areas where we're looking at supporting local communities and ensuring that, like, those long-term jobs and roles for people in some of the areas, especially in the UK, where perhaps there are less jobs. So they have a huge crossover, especially when we think about social mobility. So when we're thinking about people with lower socioeconomic backgrounds and getting them into awesome, meaningful roles.
I guess there's this misconception that an inclusive culture, in this context that we're talking about today, specifically for LGBTQ plus employees, that you are creating an inclusive culture for that group, that community, when the reality is, I've got plenty of friends that aren't in that community, but would never work for an organization that didn't value its LGBTQ plus employees. So kind of, that's really important, right? I want to work for an organization that values everybody equally, whether I'm in that minority or not.
Definitely. And I think with Ørsted, the way we brand ourselves as like very forward thinking, we're moving forward, it's vital that we have a culture to match that. As you said, people would be coming into our organization expecting perhaps that kind of inclusion, that specific support for LGBT plus people in our business. And if it isn't there, then we know we aren't attracting those people. The younger generations of, when I say younger generations, beyond millennials and like beyond, much below that, are choosing to work for organizations with a strong social purpose. And for a lot of people, we're seeing in all of our statistics and data, the more we're including LGBT plus people, the more they're coming out, and the more that we're able to identify that it's a much bigger population than we ever knew. And we need to make sure that we're keeping up with that as a business, and recognizing that having values, holding values, putting your money where your mouth is on some of these things is absolutely vital, because people can see through it. And that's, I think, why our journey as Ørsted has been slower in some ways, because I'm extremely passionate that when we do something, it means something real. So we really are like trying to make sure that when we say we support something, we have something to show that we do. It's extra important that our employees feel it if we say it in big bold letters somewhere. Yeah.
Global Pride, you sponsor Global Pride, so you've literally, pardon the pun, put your colours to the mast.
Yes, absolutely. So really interestingly, World Pride is in August. Yeah, so we're celebrating, we're having a small Pride celebration in this month, because in August we're having a huge celebration as one of the main sponsors of World Pride. It is based in Copenhagen this year, but most of it is virtual, so we're having lots of different activities going ahead. During that time, we're also launching some of our new policies and benefits, and we're also having really specific sessions to help to educate people about the history of Pride. Some of the basics around being LGBT plus, I think we sometimes take for granted that people understand the acronym. And when we did a survey in our organization, and we asked just the question, do you know what LGBT plus means? And we had about 60-ish% of people saying yes, but that's still 40% of people that don't understand what that means. And I think if we picked it apart for some of that 60%, they probably wouldn't get it either. So we've actually still got a huge journey when we're educating people in our business, especially because it's global.
I would also say to that is we've been doing stuff, well, Jess has been leading stuff on LGBT initiatives this week, and one of the things that I was on the webinar on Monday, it's being an ally. So you may not identify as that, but it's really important as an ally, we understand to be able to, how can we help? How can we support? You know, and I felt that because sometimes you don't know and you don't want to upset somebody, but it gives you the opportunity and also, you know, the openness to be able to ask those questions and to be able to support the community, because that's what you want to do. So I think being an ally is so important for everybody.
And I think
Definitely.
it's a good point as well about being an ally. You know, allies exist within the community. So I belong to the LGBTQ plus community, but I don't have any experiences of what it's like to be a trans person. I don't know what it's like, what life is like to be non-binary or bisexual. And so, you know, even my experiences within that community are very limited and probably quite privileged, because I'm still a cis white man existing within that community. And, you know, I have encountered lots of different sexualities and genders during my time at Benefex, and we've got a pretty young environment with a lot more people in the community than we expected to see. And so, you know, it's been a learning curve for me as well. And I think we do all get so worried sometimes, I think, about tripping ourselves up, that we don't want to talk about this stuff at work we might use the wrong pronouns, for example, we might say the wrong thing. And I think, you know, from my experiences, most people are quite happy to have a conversation with anyone about what do you call me and why, and, you know, kind of, and just explain some of those things. And so I think the more those conversations we have, the less over time we will have, because we'll become more educated. And I think, I don't think we should be wary of having conversations for fear of saying the wrong thing. I think most of the time people will kind of support us.
I think you're so right about that. And I think one of the things that when we speak to, so when I'm, for example, like running an allyship training session, or we're doing a basic kind of ally session, which is really helpful for colleagues who do want to be able to support but do have that fear. At the beginning, we ask them to kind of make a word cloud, all of the things that might be holding them back from kind of really stepping up and maybe doing something a little bit more active to support a community, or the LGBT community. And fear and shame and guilt are the top words always. These kinds of subjects, they really do kind of produce some of that in people. And I think we forget a couple of key things. Yeah, of course, we're kind of all allies. If you're in the LGBT plus community and you aren't an ally, we're such a broad church of people that I would be suspicious. And we also, very rarely, we're just one thing. Very rarely we represent just one thing. If you think of all the many boxes we could all tick, we've all got lots of different facets to us as human beings. So actually, there isn't anyone who has nothing to learn about another community. You can be part of the LGBT community. You can be, and you can also be a woman, for example. It's possible, and we have to be able to negotiate those kind of different identities to see that. But for me, and also being totally honest, our business, Ørsted, it's a very white, a very male, a very Danish population, right? We are engineers, we are technicians, we go and make wind turbines. And what we have to do is remember that we've got our office-based colleagues and our site-based colleagues. And the way that we communicate with them has to be a way that we start to reduce that fear, and we reduce that guilt, and we reduce that shame, and we try and start that learning. It can be so difficult to kind of, it can be so easy when we're learning about these things to say that's uncomfortable, I don't want to. And if we can make it more comfortable, I feel like that's how we can engage allies and really kind of connect. And I've also found that we have some really specific environments and situations where we have new colleagues coming into the business, and we do have to make sure that we're ready for them. So with things like facilities, and it's been really interesting to work with people who have had to learn what it means, for example, to be trans or to be non-binary in the past 12 months, and to go on a journey with them for them understanding pronouns. And they are on a site, they're technicians, they're engineers, that they've really embraced it and learned about it, because now they feel equipped to do so. They have those skills, and I think that can be really helpful. But yeah, I think it's so important to understand that kind of basics, so you can get going, so you can get kind of moving on some of those other things, and be able to remove some of that fear and guilt around not understanding, perhaps.
Excellent, thank you. So we've got 2 questions in, so I'm going to deliver these to both of you individually. Karen, do you collect, this is from Anonymous, do you collect diversity data for your employees? And if so, how has this helped shape your policies and the benefits you offer your employees?
First of all, I would love to collect diversity information. Unfortunately, we are still on that journey, and that's partly because we are a little bit of red tape, and I don't want to blame the red tape, because you can always get around it, but we are a Danish company, and we have to go with the EU laws in terms of GDPR, and we have like different countries as well. So absolutely we can in the UK, but our data is stored in Denmark, so we do have to be very careful. And I'm sort of trying to work through the legal aspects of that with our GDPR team. And absolutely I want to, but that doesn't mean to say that we can't put practices in place to ensure that we do include everybody. So we've just recently, well, we haven't launched it yet, but we've written a transitioning policy. Absolutely really important that we do this, because it will happen. We know it will happen, and we want to be ready for when it happens. And now I look at that from an HR point of view. We said to Jess, can you have a look at it? And then we said, right, then can we go to our inclusion networks? Can we go to our LGBT community? Can they have a look at it? What have we missed? What haven't we put in there? And by doing that, it's taken longer, but I really think we've got a better product at the end of it. So yes, I would love to collect that data, but that doesn't mean to say that without the data, we still can't put practices in and do things to still help the community.
And you're almost saying, actually, it doesn't matter how many trans people exist in our business. We want to do this thing, right? So whether it's 1 or 100, we want to do the right thing for whoever's working here.
Yeah, everybody is an individual.
And one of the, so kind of like rolling back a little bit, a couple of steps. So we're legally able to collect data around gender, age and nationality. In Denmark, it's illegal to ask someone their sexual orientation, religion or ethnicity. So we have to hold our data in Denmark. So even if we collected it in the UK, when it was in Denmark, they wouldn't be able to give it back to us. So at the moment, what we're doing is working on a UK-US system that collects all of those things. So that's where we're developing something on that, but it has to be separate to any Danish system. So that's where the challenge comes in. And with the data we have been able to make some changes and some shifts, but obviously it isn't specific, especially when we think about supporting the LGBT community. But what we will say is that the LGBT community, so when I think about our community, we do have like global stats, and we are a relatively small population of humans. But the reason why we create policies that are LGBT plus inclusive, like our policy that's specifically for people transitioning, so people who are looking to move towards the gender that they feel they were all along, is essentially because it is a policy that takes a little bit of time to create, but the amount of people that will use it through the entirety of our organization is very small. But the impact it has on that one individual, the fact that we have something available for them, is huge. So the implications are so small for us as a business, but they're so huge for any employee that we have who does want to transition, or who does want to do things like even just change or shift their name in our systems, who does want to know that when they're calling up some of our benefits providers, that when they're speaking about their partner, for example, that benefit provider is ready to, is not going to be making assumptions about the gender of their partner, as an example, that when they talk about their family, they aren't going to be assuming anything about them. We want to be able to, and also to support and work with some of our partners to make sure that we're able, with the knowledge that we have, to work together to create more LGBT plus inclusive products and ideas. And with some of our policies, for example, our parental leave policy that Karen was absolutely integral on, it was as simple as ensuring that we were talking about parents, that we were talking about the parent who gave birth, and the parent and the primary caregiver and the secondary caregiver, or the caregivers, and all of those kind of different phrases, rather than just saying the mother and the father and the mother and the father. And that's really easy for us in the UK. So we've been able to shift that really well in the UK. But we also know that when we come to creating our global minimum standard, which is the step that we're taking now, that does present slightly more of a challenge. Parental leave is complex, but it's so important for us to have that as inclusive, so that it's a change in a word, but what it can mean to someone who is in a same-sex relationship trying to have a baby can be huge, have a huge implication on how we retain them. And for us, they are relatively small and minor changes that are not expensive. And for them, that can be a huge thing. And it's also really symbolic of what we stand for and what we mean. So even though policies are just one thing, and we know that policies don't always change behaviours, having that basis, having that solid ground to stand on when we do things like sponsor World Pride, are absolutely vital, so that we're able to say, this is the basis that we stand on, this is our solid foundation. And it's a really great thing to be able to partner with people who are also interested in making sure that we have that when it comes to things like our policies, our benefits, etc.
And it is really important that we have these policies and everything written in the right way, because when I come as part of my role to interpret that policy to help somebody, I've got the support there. I've got the information at my fingertips. It doesn't look like I'm scrabbling around for something.
Yeah.
I can immediately send them the policy. I can talk through it, we've got it there, everything. So the individual then feels comfortable. They know that we care about them as an individual.
And Karen, Jessica mentioned then about things like benefit policies and how you'll be able to create and change the policies and the wording and the language that you use. And I know that this year you're going to embark on this project to kind of really look at the benefits you offer and how those are worded. And I think you both said when we spoke previous to this call that you wanted everyone to connect with policies. And I thought that was a really nice phrase, that when people read, whether it's a benefit policy, a pensions document, they see themselves represented in it. So how important is inclusivity to reward and benefits? Because I'm not entirely sure that's a conversation that's been had much. And part of the reason why I wanted you both to come onto this call was because it's not being talked about. People aren't looking at some of these old pension policies or these benefit policies and kind of actually running them through that diversity machine and seeing what comes out the other side.
Yeah, it's quite pertinent actually, because we are moving on to the benefits platform, and I was just looking at the content pages for our wellbeing, which had been sent to me by one of your colleagues, and I'd actually looked at it and thought, oh, that looks fine to me. I'm a reward manager, it's got all the information I need on it. But I actually sent it off to Jess and said, can you have a quick look at this? And she came back to me, and it was actually on our EAP. She goes, well, do we support LGBT plus people or not? Or what's it say about that? So I think there's a challenge here that we actually do need to be inclusive in our benefits. Obviously, working with our providers, and also challenge the insurance company, the providers, is what are they providing now? Because yes, some of the, it is steeped in quite old sort of history. This is all how we've done it, and I think we're just starting on this journey as we go through. I mean, things like we have already started to challenge Scottish widows on where do you actually invest our funds as a pension? What do you do with those funds as a pension? We're a green energy, we're sustainable energy. Are you putting them in oil? Are you putting them in things we actually, our employees don't value and don't sort of connect with? And I think this is the same with a lot of our benefits, and the whole of the site, as we taught, we will be looking at that when we look at the content pages, when we look at the wording, to make sure that we don't actually consciously unconsciously exclude somebody, that we want to work with them and have a look at all that wording. So I will have taken some of Jess's comments. I don't know the answers to them, but I've gone and I will challenge the provider, because I think, the more everybody does that, the more the providers will listen.
Absolutely. And you guys are the customer, right? So we know that the consumer will always force the change. And I don't see that as being any different in a B2B world, where, if you guys ask the right questions, people like Benefex and the providers that we work with will start to think about, actually, is there a better way for us to talk about some of these things? Oh, sorry.
No. I was very quick, I promise. And what we've really learned, especially from working closely with our LGBT plus network, is that we need to be explicit. So if our providers are LGBT plus inclusive, so when someone comes on, if they're LGBT plus, that person will kind of have a very even just a basic knowledge to know what to do, not gender their partner before they have think about some of those really basic things. If we're not explicit about it, so if we assume they'll assume, that's not kind of a way forward for us. We need to be saying, this provider is LGBT plus friendly. This provider is LGBT plus friendly. So if someone is from that community, they feel able to call that person. We provide counselling, we provide other wellbeing services. If we don't have a counsellor available that has that understanding, that does understand someone from the LGBT plus community, what can we do about it? Should we be thinking about how we can support our partners to also deliver that? So it's so important to be explicit about it, so that that's like a comfort level that we can just assume.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We've got another question in from Karis. Thank you for your question, Karis. You mentioned celebrating World Pride. What would you recommend when creating an inclusive internal celebration for LGBTQ plus colleagues and allies? So, Jessica.
Very, very fun. Yes. So for us, it's been really, really interesting. So, of course, World Pride is based in Copenhagen. There are some really specific things happening there. But what we wanted to do is make sure it came alive in all of our different regions, and create something that was inclusive of allies and also the LGBT plus community. So our business has a few things that we like to promote and talk about a lot, and one of them is movement. So we like getting people to move, we like having people do exercising. It's a vital thing. It's one of those really amazing things that definitely comes from our Danish culture, which is like, go and have a walk. So one of the things that we're doing is specific, inclusive, human being friendly exercise classes with lots of different themes that represent the LGBT plus community. So that's the first fun thing that we're doing. I think sometimes you have to have fun during Pride. There's a share themed one, I think. And then there's a couple of others that we're just deciding now. So we've got a few fun activities going on. We like to balance our fun with our seriousness. We do. And then we've also got some really interesting basic kind of education sessions and a panel event. We've also got, of course, the usual kind of, like, I would describe them as they're sustainable freebies, because that's the business that we are. But what's really important is that if you're someone who, for example, you'd like a rainbow lanyard, when you get your rainbow lanyard, it comes with 3 ways to be a good ally, and they've got the 3 things there, and you have to do one of those as part of having the rainbow lanyard and wearing your rainbow lanyard. So we try and balance our kind of fun with our education. And in our team, I'm like the boring one who constantly is making everyone be serious and think about why we're doing these things. So yeah, so those are a couple of the things that we're doing. And we also do all of the other, usual things. We're really lucky that we have canteens in all of our locations, and all of our canteens will be providing are currently providing, and will continue to be providing Pride themed food. I don't know exactly what it is. Smoothies, cupcakes.
Last year, we had, not last year but the year before, in London, we had multicolored biscuits and multicolored cupcakes. Which really, it was great. But what it did was, when you were sitting down eating, it sparked conversation. And that's what it does, is it starts that conversation. Even if you're thinking, this is a blue biscuit, or this bit of the biscuit's blue, but it doesn't really taste right because I'm not used to this type of like multicolored food. It made us talk, which is good.
Excellent. And so, and Karen, you mentioned before about kind of red tape. What are some of the challenges to being a more inclusive employer?
I think for me, as a reward person, a lot of it is the data. We can easily get our, we have to do our gender-based pay nowadays. That's a legal requirement. I'd love to do a little bit more and have a look at our reward, and does that reflect your different LGBT? Sorry, I'm so sorry. I can never say it. So the community. Are we getting this right, or are we getting this wrong in actual terms of our reward, but also our benefits? Are we actually making sure that we give the right benefits to the right people at the right time? Now, if I can't get that data in terms of the red tape, I can't do that. I can't sort of look at just the data. I don't want names, I just want the data. How many people are in this community, and am I making sure that they're getting the benefits they need? Do they have what they want? And I just written some things down, because it's almost that you can't ask people, you know, we can't necessarily, we have to ask their permission to store some of this data, to have some of that data, whereas it is very difficult because we want to use the data in the right way.
Yeah.
And people will be suspicious of why we want it.
Of course. But you're absolutely right. We know that there are specific challenges that exist within the LGBTQ plus community that don't exist or aren't as prevalent in the wider communities. And so mental health, for example, is kind of, I think, depending on what we look at, 3 times worse. So knowing if you have large portions of people bring into the community means you might have to kind of adjust how you support people. And you mentioned things like EAP, so making sure that everyone knows that if you are going through the coming out process, if you're going through the transitioning process, for example, that your EAP can support you with that. It's not just about heterosexual relationship issues or death, whatever it might be. There's other associated things. And we know things like, even right the way down to financial well-being, we know there are specific challenges that gay people face when looking for things like travel insurance. And actually, because if you travel to a country that's homophobic and you get beaten up for traveling to that country, are you included or excluded for something that might happen? It's actually much more complex, I think, than some people realize. And financial resilience is actually lower as well in the LGBTQ plus community for a whole host of kind of socioeconomic reasons. So I think it's really important what you say there about actually making sure the benefits you offer are as inclusive, not just the wording that you use, which is really important. And Jessica, you as an organization operate in locations where being gay is still illegal or not as accepted as it might be in the UK and the US. How do you deal with that as a business?
So we have growing, in some cases, operations in countries with those legal challenges. And the most important thing for us and our position on this is that any colleague in any country deserves to feel psychologically safe inside of their workplace. So we have started to designate our offices as safe spaces, which means that if you are LGBT plus and you are working in one of those communities, so you're based in one of those communities, you can expect that in the workplace we will hold every person to our standard, no matter where you are in the world, which essentially means we have that we would expect that if you were experiencing discrimination or harassment, it would be treated exactly the same in those countries as it would in any other. And more importantly, we encourage our employees to become allies. So in those countries, for the safety of our employees, we have allyship networks. So those networks represent allies specifically, which means that you don't have to identify yourself as LGBT+, but you can become an ally and make sure that if anyone is LGBT+ in one of our offices, they see the people that they could go to, for example, for that additional support, which is really important for us in those spaces. So we have the safe spaces and allyship. And for us, it's definitely about so that we are a relatively small inclusion team. So one of the things that we do, and one of the reasons why working with Karen is so great, is we work with other teams to empower them to be able to think about inclusion. So we have a specific mobility team, and one of the things that we're doing at the moment is working with them so that they understand the challenges. For example, if somebody was going to be wanted to be able to work in Malaysia, for example, and they were LGBT+, we would have to work really carefully with that team to make sure that the risk assessments were in place to do that. Now, the decision is ultimately with that individual. When we've put everything in place that we possibly can to ensure they're safe, it is with that individual to decide. But what we don't want to do is create a situation where there are career opportunities that somebody can't follow because they're LGBT+. And I would say that that's definitely the part that we're really still working on, making sure that we can create as much safety as possible, but ensure that LGBT colleagues are having that mobility. And it's a really tough conversation. It's not a conversation it's not always a conversation that we have had in, especially in Denmark, where a lot of our like key global functions are. It's not a conversation we've had before. It's not something that we're thinking about regularly. So being able to work with people like Karen who do have that thought, let's see how inclusive we can make this. Let's make sure that this is as inclusive as possible, and let's do as much as we can with the powers and abilities we have to do that, is really, really helpful. Because we don't have that in every area. That is something that we're definitely still working on. So yeah.
But I would say, as a sort of somebody who works with, you know, colleagues in Malaysia, in Poland, in Denmark, all these different countries, we do say on our intranet, you know, look out for these colleagues in these countries, you know, be aware, you know, be thoughtful. And that is really important, that, you know, I know that, okay, the person I may be talking to in Poland may not be within the community, but just to be aware that they could be, and that, you know, I can just be an ally for them, even if I am in the UK.
My building alarm has just gone off. So we're coming to the end now. So I'll come to you, Jessica, with a final word. Kind of what would you like to say to people who are listening? And also a little bit about how closely you work with Karen. I think, you know, having you both from diversity and HR working so closely together, I think is really important and great to see. And again, I'm not entirely sure that happens as often as it probably should.
So I think for me and for us, we are working, so as an inclusion team, my entire purpose is to equip as many people in as many teams in our business as possible to be able to have that thinking, have that thought around inclusion before they deliver what they're doing. It isn't just me. It's not just me who should be thinking those thoughts and should be having that kind of additional thought. So I am there to provide advice. I am not there to provide expertise in everybody's subject areas. And so what's fantastic about us being able to work closely together is, first of all, that HR function, that pay and benefits function, is one of the first places that we symbolize to people, one of the first things that new employees see, one of the first places that people will go to for an explore to see what's going on. And we have to make sure that we've got as much available for as many colleagues as possible. That basic right that a lot of us take for granted, we have to be able to provide. And working closely enables us to make sure that when we are having an inclusion celebration, when we are having a dance, when we are eating a rainbow cupcake, I can rest. I can be assured that we've also got that backup in the way that we do things, which is so important for having that genuine approach, having that real feel of legitimacy to what we do. And also, it doesn't take anything away from colleagues that aren't part of the LGBT plus community. It doesn't remove anything from them. It only adds to that feeling of inclusion. So it's a really important thing to be able to do in this time period, I think.
Well, thank you very much. That's all we've got time for today. I really, really appreciate you both joining us and making those kind of clear links between HR, wellbeing, reward and benefits, and inclusion. As I mentioned, I think it's often missed. So we really appreciate you giving us real life examples of how you're doing that. I will be back on the 2nd of July when I'll be joined by Janet O'Hare, HR Change Partner at Capita. We'll be talking about the role of HR and how that's changed and has new responsibilities post-COVID. Janet has a wealth of experience and will share some of the challenges they faced as a large global organisation, which will no doubt help you in your own planning. Thank you very much for your questions and comments. Thank you so much to Jessica and Karen. Really appreciate you taking the time out to join us, and we shall see you all next time. Thank you.
Thanks very much for having us. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.